Welcome to the Veganuary podcast, the podcast that helps you to try a vegan diet. It's stuffed full of hints and tips for anyone who wants to eat more plants.
All of Veganuary's resources are free, and this podcast is free from ads too. But Veganuary is a charity, so if you like what we do, we would be so grateful if you'd consider making a donation at veganuary.com/donate.
Hello again, Wendy.
Hi, Stu. It's good to be back. Thinking of the most or least vegan thing that has happened to you this week.
I'm cheating a bit because this isn't something that's happened to me. It's something that's happened to a colleague, Tracy. So Tracy messaged me to say that she had been waiting in a supermarket queue and the person in front of her was having their things scanned through the scanner. And the member of staff said, "Have you got a points card?" And they said, "No." So Tracy said, "Well, can I have your points?" So she gave this stranger her points card to get the points, which feels like a very Tracy thing. Anyway, then Tracy said to me that now she keeps getting inundated with emails and recommendations based around what that person bought, which was all meat.
Oh,
so
no.
She's getting inundated with these recommendations for, like pork chops or I don't know really what. But yeah, I thought that was quite funny. But it's good. It's good to kind of trick the data harvesters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Points never come free.
Absolutely.
Well, we'd love to hear from our listeners too. If you have a most or least vegan moment of the week, you can email us with your stories at podcast@veganuary.com.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. It's like a bit of a nutrition-focused episode today because we have an interview coming up with Rohini from the Plant-Based Health Professionals. But it just made me wonder, how do you stay on top of your vegan nutrition?
A few years ago, I started doing a bit more strength training. And for the first time in my life, I was the one asking where I got my protein and if I was getting enough protein. I know that it's not difficult to get a healthy amount of protein on a vegan diet from all of the research I've done over the years, but I wasn't sure about a highly physically active person who was trying to build muscle. So I started tracking my nutrition in one of these free, popular nutrition tracker apps. And it turns out I wasn't getting enough protein, or at least I wasn't getting the recommended amount for the amount of activity I was getting. And so I just made little tweaks to my diet. I started being more intentional, started including more tofu and tempeh and seitan and beans, and just making sure I was getting some solid protein at every meal. And then I added in a protein shake or a protein bar most days. And I found it wasn't very hard to make up those numbers. It just took a little bit of intention, a little bit of planning. And I also take my supplements every day without fail. All right, what about you? Are you pretty good with keeping up with your nutrition? Are you a planner?
Yeah, I think I am. When you register, when you sign up for Veganuary, we have as one of our resources something called the Daily Dozen, which is like a checklist of things that nutritionists recommend you should eat every day. And I've sort of really adopted that into my daily life. And I find that a really good resource. And I suppose the only slight downside is I kind of eat the same things pretty much every day. But so in the morning I have porridge and I always put ground flax seeds and chia seeds in there because that's really good for getting your omegas. And then every day I have a salad. So I have lots of fruit, lots of vegetables, cruciferous veg. I also throw a handful of nuts in my salad. So I get protein there. And usually by that point, I've kind of that's me having done, and I'll have maybe a banana and an apple through the day. And at that point, that's me kind of done on achieving all the things that's recommended in this Daily Dozen just from those two meals. And then I'll just have something in the evening where it'll make sure I've got a good balance of protein and fiber. So yeah, that's kind of how I do it. And then I also have vitamins. So I have vitamin D through the winter, and iodine and B12. So yeah.
Well, I'm impressed. I think you're going to live forever.
It'd be good, wouldn't it? Yeah, I always feel quite chuffed at myself for being on top of it, because it's not the easiest thing when you transition to being vegan. I think using one of those tracker apps, like I've done that as well, and I think it can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes to feel like you have to track every meal, but I just will maybe just check in every now and then and just spend a couple of days doing it, and then I won't do it again for a few months. And like you, like I started strength training a few years ago, and I found that really useful to see, how much protein I actually needed and how much I was getting.
Yeah, I remember we ran into each other at the gym at our staff retreat. So Stu and I are in there getting the muscle.
Yes. Good. Right. Well, that's a good segue into speaking to Rohini from the plant-based health professionals who came and spoke to us a few weeks ago. So yeah, we'll play that interview now. Rohini Bajekal is a highly qualified nutritionist who has followed a vegan diet for 23 years. Rohini has a strong interest in hormonal health and how plant-based nutrition can help in the management of conditions such as fertility issues, endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, premenopause and menopause. Rohini is the nutritionist at Menopause Care, the UK's leading virtual menopause service. She hosts CPD accredited webinars for plant-based health professionals, and she has co-authored a best-selling book called Living PCOS Free, which was published in 2022. Hi, Rohini.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks so much for having me here. Huge fan of everything that you guys are doing at Veganuary.
Brill. We'd like to launch in and ask you what your dream vegan meal is.
Gosh, it's hard to pick one. I'm a giant foodie, so I literally wake up in the morning and think about what I'm going to eat for the day. But I would say it would probably be kind of back to kind of my heritage, which is South Indian. And there's actually so many different dishes that people might not know. You might know of things like a masala dosa or idlis, which are quite popular in the vegan community and just generally. But there's actually so many regional dishes, and my parents are from two different parts of South India. So it would be something called a thamli, which is it's like a coconut based dish with fresh lemons and curry leaves, and it's just tastes like home to me. That would be my kind of dream vegan meal. With in Indian food, we often have lots of different elements of the meal, and I'm someone that really likes variety. So I would have like a soya cucumber raita. I would have different vegetable side dishes like green beans and probably some brown rice or red rice, like local red rice, and that would just ideally be eaten on a banana leaf if I was really going to be specific there, because that was the traditional way to have it. But I think we often kind of go back to the foods that we grew up with and foods that just feel really kind of familiar and nourishing to us.
That sounds so good. So you went vegan 23 years ago, which is incredible. What sparked that initial decision, and how has your perspective evolved over the decades?
Well, thank you so much, Wendy. So my vegan journey began so long ago, about almost 25 years ago now, close to that. But it was my younger sister, who was actually 9 years old at the time. She came home one day and said that she wasn't going to eat animals because we'd just recently got a dog, and she made the connection about pigs being very intelligent, very empathetic in lots of ways, and realized that there wasn't much dissimilarity between that and having our dog. So she decided she wasn't going to eat sausages anymore, which were her favorite food before that. And my mum and I decided to support, and we also went veggie. My dad was a pescatarian. And then it wasn't long after, it's probably about 6 months or so afterwards, maybe a bit longer than that, actually, but maybe a couple of years actually going back. So she started reading into kind of where dairy came from. And this is, by the way, just at the advent of the internet. So you couldn't get the resources now. You couldn't go on TikTok and look up things. And it's probably a little surprise that she went and became a journalist. But she was shocked to discover the truth about the dairy industry. And she was just a child at the time, but she came home and said, white equals red. So the same milk that becomes dairy is that what's going to happen when that cow gets old. They're going to be slaughtered because they're no longer useful. And that was quite a shock to my parents, because vegetarianism is quite widely accepted in lots of parts of India, although some of the statistics are sort of incorrect. It's not as common as sometimes. It's very tied to sort of caste and lots of other issues that are present in India. But my parents were familiar with vegetarianism, but they had no idea what vegan was, because dairy is seen as really sacred, really healthy in Indian culture. So it was like starting from scratch. And this was back in the days where all you could get was a chalky carton of soya milk from the supermarket. You couldn't even get any of the kind of range that you get now. You'd have to go to special health food stores to get anything. And you couldn't get vegan baked goods or any of the fun foods that obviously vegan children and teenagers want to eat. All of us want to eat from time to time. So my mum, who both my parents were busy surgeons working 60 hours a week, and they would make everything from scratch. Both my parents put a lot of effort into helping raise us vegan. They wanted to make sure that if we're going to be vegan, we're going to be as healthy as possible. And so we did take B12 supplements. Again, there was such little information about all of this. But I think, credit to them for supporting us. They've always supported our decisions and our ethical beliefs. And both my mother and I went fully vegan because of my sister, so many, many moons ago. And it's been quite a journey. It hasn't been a linear journey. Whilst I grew up as a vegan teen, and I found that really helped me, because I think a lot of my friends were experimenting with dieting and those sorts of things. And I think realizing that food had a bigger purpose, and it was for animals, and, the compassion side. I didn't know about the environmental side then at all, because we just didn't have that information available. And I didn't know about the health, which is surprising to people who might be listening thinking you're a nutritionist. But we didn't know that being vegan was healthier then. But it just so happened that I grew up on a whole food plant-based diet full of whole grains, fruits, veggies, beans, nuts and seeds. And I definitely knew all the accidentally vegan fun foods like the Oreos and the bourbon biscuits and things. But there was a limit to how many of those you could have, because you didn't have the options you have now. So it was really wonderful teenage years. I was really healthy. And it was only when I went to university that I started to struggle with veganism. And that was because there was such a lack of education from other people. I was often bullied, made fun of, told no one's going to want to date me because I'm vegan. No one even knew what the term meant. So every single meal I had to explain my choices and get into arguments. And I'm not a very confrontational sort of person, so it was very challenging. And I definitely found that by the end of university, I just lost so much confidence. And this was at Oxford, so I expected to meet other kind of people that were curious and interrogating things, but I did not find that, unfortunately. I didn't meet anyone else who was vegan when I was there. And by the end, I'd started to eat some animal products when I went out, so kind of some dairy and stuff had crept into my diet. And I think it's really hard. Once you know, you can't unknow. So I always say to people, there's no such thing as a perfect vegan. Bear in mind, this was so many years ago where you didn't have the options you have now. You didn't have the community. And that's why I always say to people, find your people, find people who are going to, be there on that journey with you, and who are going to support your choices and respect them. That's really, really important.
That's so interesting, the contrast between your experience with your family and then the experience when you went to university. And I was looking at some research this week about how people find it much easier to adopt a plant-based diet if they do have the support of friends and family, and if they don't, they really struggle. So that's really interesting. You mentioned university. I was intrigued to read that you did theology at university. So I was interested to know how you started as a reading theology and then became a nutritionist. What was that journey?
So again, it comes back to that variety. And what I loved about theology was asking questions, interrogating, looking at things. You don't actually have to be religious or anything to study theology. I don't have faith myself, but it was fascinating to kind of just ask those big questions that people have been asking for millennia, really. And getting a chance to delve into history, English, ancient Greek, language, and realizing how much kind of similarities we've had as human beings for all of these years. And I think I've always been quite a curious type of person, so it was suited me really well. But it was afterwards, when I was working in the food industry in London and working in public relations, and there's some companies that, you know, were producing products that I definitely didn't ethically align with, whether it was alcohol or milk chocolate and things like that, and just feeling really lost. I think I'd grown up in a family where both my parents went into medicine to try and make the world a better place, to try and heal people, and then doing something which felt quite empty to me. And it just really jarred with who I was, and I wanted to get some kind of deeper purpose in my life. So I moved to India to work for a health food startup, and that started me on a journey that changed my life, because it was while I was there where I reverted back to kind of my whole food plant-based lifestyle, embracing ethical veganism. You know, I'd always followed a fully vegan diet at home, but I found it so challenging when I went out with friends or on dates, or to constantly feel different and not embrace that. And I started to kind of just embrace that and really really understand who I was and be proud of who I was. So being in India was amazing, because I suddenly was eating foods that I had grown up with again, and loads of fresh fruit. I'd been terrified of fruit because I thought it had too much sugar, and I'd struggled with hormonal acne and later symptoms of what I would find out would be polycystic ovary syndrome. So irregular periods and acne, anxiety, lots of things that lots of women go through. And it was when I was in India and I'd adopted this healthy lifestyle, not because I'd gone on a diet, but just because I was immersed in that environment of healthy living, that my skin cleared up. I noticed I had way more energy, and I thought, wow, maybe actually there's also a health aspect of this as well, that foods can play a powerful role in our healing and our overall mental and physical health. And that made me want to go back to university, study nutrition. In my, I was a more mature student at this point. This was about 9 years ago, and I've never looked back. I, was able to start my practice, help loads of other people adopt a more plant-based diet, many of them who'd go on to become vegan, and as well as help vegans who are struggling with their health as well, because just because you're vegan doesn't mean you can't have chronic health issues or pain or other things. And it's not that a vegan diet is a one-stop shop and it's a fix-all, but I definitely think it's helped me so much mentally and physically. My entire family is vegan. My husband went vegan because of Veganuary, actually, about 5 years ago. He decided to do the challenge, and I said, okay, what about me? Have I played a role in this? He's like, no, I just think it makes sense. I just think it makes a lot of sense. So he went vegan, and his whole family went vegan because of me. So my sisters-in-law, my parents-in-law, they're all vegan. So we have a really amazing family where we get to go on holidays with like 14 of us all eating amazing vegan food. I realize that's not the norm. I talk to so many clients every day who don't have partners who eat the same way as them, or children, or siblings or friends even. So I know how isolating it can be. I never forget where I've come from and the journey that I had of kind of being mocked and teased and bullied simply for wanting to do something that just makes logical sense, not wanting to hurt animals, really.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I love that your partner went vegan because of Veganuary. That's fantastic. And the thing you said about fruit resonates with me so much because, I grew up with parents who were doing the South Beach diet and the Atkins diet. And for a long time, I also just felt like fruit was too much sugar and I really avoided it. And I love fruit. Like, I've really brought it back into my life, and it just feels so good. It's such a, just such a vitamin rich thing that I think a lot of us have learned at some point to avoid. So I think a lot of women will resonate with that. So let's talk about hormone health. Could you explain to us the fundamental connection between diet and hormone health?
So there's so much misinformation online about diet and hormone health, and diet is one part of the picture when it comes to our hormones, but it can play a massive role in not just our hormonal health, obviously in every single system in the body. But what's amazing about it is that nutrition can massively impact how our hormones function, and especially if you've got underlying hormonal issues such as polycystic ovary syndrome, or you've got other conditions, it can really kind of ameliorate the symptoms or worsen them. And I always try and focus on the positives. I'm someone that's quite a naturally positive person, so I try and focus with my clients on what they can bring into the diet. But the two most common hormones that immediately come to mind are sort of estrogen and testosterone. And one of the things that comes up repeatedly in the context of veganism is obviously soya. Now, soya is a really popular food. I've eaten 2 to 4 portions of soya every single day for the last 20 plus years. And luckily, I started it in my teenage years, where we know there may be some benefits for reducing lifetime risk of breast cancer, and even more for prostate cancer reduction if started earlier in kind of childhood or in adolescence. So it can make a big difference. But a lot of people are frightened about soya because they think, okay, I don't want to eat foods that are going to worsen my hormonal health. So soya is an example of a food where there's a lot of misinformation, but soya is just a bean. It's an incredible bean because it has profound implications for health if it's consumed in kind of either minimally processed or unprocessed forms. It's rich in phytoestrogens, and there's a lot of confusion. Okay, estrogen, if you're a guy, you're thinking, I don't want to have more estrogen. And if you're a woman and you've got things, or you menstruate and you've got things like endometriosis or PCOS, you're thinking, I don't want more estrogen either. But the way that plant estrogens work is completely different, and they're approximately about 1,000 times weaker than mammalian estrogen as well. But soya has something called the SERM effect. So it's pro-estrogenic in some tissues, such as the bone, helping with things like bone density, which is obviously really helpful, helping to reduce the risk of things like osteoporosis in perimenopausal and menopausal women. And it also has an anti-estrogenic effect in other tissues, such as the breast, where potentially helping to reduce the rates of things like breast cancer. Now, soya alone, I'm not suggesting that's going to magically vanish certain things, but it's rich in protein. It's a great source of iron. It's a great source of loads of other micronutrients, including manganese, and it contains fiber. There's so many benefits of it, and it's very versatile. So it's fantastic to add to a plant-based diet. And it's also rich in isoflavones, which have other benefits for health as well, such as helping to potentially reduce things such as hot flashes. In PCOS, it's been shown to help improve the regularity of the menstrual cycle, helping to reduce the appearance of wrinkles and menopause. So loads of benefits, and even for men as well, helping with things like sperm health. So there's plenty of reasons to include soya in the diet. My favorite sources are things like tofu, tempeh, soya milk, and soy yogurt, because it lends itself really well to a Western or Eastern diet, because you can have things like a soya cucumber raita, or you can put it onto your porridge in the morning. I do like to mix things up, so get a variety of plant proteins in, but soya is just something that I'm really passionate about dispelling the myths, because it's such a delicious, convenient, and nutrient-rich food.
Well, Wendy and I have been talking about how much we love eating just chunks of raw tofu on their own, the
Hardcore.
It's hardcore, yeah. The soya thing, the soya myth, has really been adopted by like the manosphere and the alt-right, which is a very hot topic at the moment. And you hear about them talking about soy boys and sharing the memes of soy boys. So I love any opportunity to dispel that myth. You've touched on some of the areas of hormonal health that you focus on. I wonder if we could dig down into some of those now and maybe talk about PCOS, which is polycystic ovary syndrome. Could you briefly explain what PCOS is?
So PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome, is a condition that affects the endocrine system, and it's actually, there's nothing wrong with your ovaries, but it affects how they function. And it has a widespread range of reproductive, metabolic, and other effects on the body. So that sounds like a real mouthful, but essentially it results in sort of hormonal irregularities, or you might see things such as acne, cystic acne that appears on the jawline. And this isn't just your typical sort of teenage acne. It can be really persistent even in adulthood. You might notice that it's a lot easier to gain weight. So you might be living in a larger body. If you've got PCOS, it's more common, but it can occur in lean people as well. And you might notice scalp hair loss, where your hair is falling out, particularly around this sort of area. And you might notice excess facial and body hair growth. And that's as a result of having higher levels of androgens, such as testosterone. Testosterone is just one example of androgens. And there's a lot of myths about hormones, this idea that, oh, testosterone's a male hormone and estrogen's a female hormone. But the truth is all genders have both hormones in varying quantities. And there's no such thing as, oh, this is just a male hormone. So it's really important to use the right language and not use kind of stigmatizing language around it. It affects at least 1 in 10 women or people who are assigned female at birth. And it's really common in some groups as well. So, for example, people going through infertility, because if you're not having regular periods, of course, it's difficult to fall pregnant. Although it can be that there are lots of different kind of options out there, including fertility treatments and things like that that can help. What's interesting about PCOS is whilst it can be incredibly distressing to have all of these symptoms or have even a few of these symptoms, especially because the society we live in, I always say, expects women to be as smooth as a dolphin, have no hair on their bodies, but obviously have a thick head of hair. So there's just a lot of expectations and beauty standards which make it difficult, but you don't fit into that to kind of live up to that. And then obviously going through fertility issues can be really challenging as well. So it has wide-ranging effects. It also is linked to mental health conditions like OCD, depression and anxiety, and disordered eating as well. So you see all of those much more commonly in PCOS. The hallmark of it is insulin resistance. So insulin is this vital hormone that regulates our blood sugar. And in PCOS, it's just not working as it should. So what happens is our tissues, our cells become resistant to insulin. And that's why you might see in the kind of earlier stages, insulin kind of going up as the pancreas repeatedly tries to push up more and more to try and get glucose into the cells so we can use it for energy. So if you think about insulin resistance, it's something that can happen in loads of us. We have it sometimes with, aging, or if we've been really sedentary, when we've only slept a few hours, you'll be more insulin resistant that day. But it's sort of a hallmark of PCOS. And there's lots of things we can do to improve our insulin sensitivity. Simple things like going for a 10-minute walk after a meal, or eating a whole food plant-based diet, which is rich in fiber and low in saturated fat. All of these things can really help normalize blood sugar levels. There's a big craze right now talking about glucose, and we all need to be monitoring our blood glucose levels, which I'm not a fan of, but we do need to be living a lifestyle, of course, that helps with our insulin sensitivity. It can really help, clear up that hormonal acne, get those periods kind of coming in regularly again, and it can be life-changing. And in fact, all the national and international guidelines for PCOS recommend lifestyle changes as the first line of treatment before any other drugs or therapies. You might need those, and there shouldn't be any shame around medication or stigma around it, but how powerful is that? And guess what diet they recommend? Whilst they didn't put a name to it, and there's not considered to be one specific diet for PCOS, the studies are very clear that a diet that's rich in whole grains, beans, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds is incredibly powerful for PCOS and for regulating hormonal health.
What are some of the most dramatic transformations you've seen in your PCOS patients?
Oh my goodness, I wouldn't even know where to start. Well, I'd say my mum and I published our book together. My mum's a gynecologist, so we have always been super passionate about women's health. And women's health is not just for women, it's actually everyone needs to learn about it, because as I said, you'll have someone in your life who's either going through menopause or pregnancy or getting their period for the first time or going through PCOS, and we need to destigmatize talking about periods and having these conversations openly. So that's why we wrote this book, is to kind of get that conversation out there into the public. And we've been on things like ITV This Morning and on the radio, and both of us are not the kinds of people that love to do all of that stuff. It can feel quite overexposing, but getting that message out has been life-changing. I've personally had so many, I can't even tell you the number of clients I've had who've been able to get their cycle back after it's been missing for 8 or 9 months. They've given up hope. They've been able to fall pregnant without having all the invasive procedures that are associated with obviously IVF and other fertility treatments. I've had other people who felt like they finally feel at home in their body after years of being at war with it, dealing with things like disordered eating and feeling just the hormonal chaos of PCOS. It's been incredible. And obviously not everyone is going to have a dramatic transformation. It can be more subtle for some people. But one thing is absolutely clear. PCOS is linked to a higher risk of other chronic conditions, including things like type 2 diabetes. You have about a 6 times higher risk of it if you've got PCOS. You've got a higher risk of gestational diabetes, which is diabetes when you're pregnant, and potentially things like cardiovascular disease as well. So if you're able to make these lifestyle changes, it's not just one diet for PCOS, one diet for endometriosis, one diet for low testosterone. It's the same diet that helps all of these conditions. So if you make those lifestyle changes, your partner will probably benefit if you are partnered, or your friends or the people you live with. It's going to have this ripple effect for the rest of your life. And I've seen that with so many of my clients. They said, my boyfriend's never going to eat tofu. He's a complete carnivore. He's not. And then I speak to them, 3 months later, they've been able to make these changes, and they find that their partners got really into it. They don't mind being a soy boy. They're loving it. And they're also being able to, they've also changed their palate to enjoy more of these healthier foods. So I always focus on what people can add into the diet. I think so often the conversation around veganism, which is natural, it's going to focus on cutting all these foods out. And for some people, that can be really daunting, especially if they've had a background of disordered eating and restriction. But actually, a plant-based diet and veganism in general, it's abundance. It's actually widening your circle of compassion and just kind of opening your heart up. And I think that's what I try and teach everyone. I share with everyone that I work with, that passion for bringing in more color into the diet, more fiber, more vitamins, hyper nourishing yourself. And the results are absolutely transformative. And I've seen it for myself. I struggled with really, really severe PCOS symptoms. My hair was falling out in chunks when I was at university. I often wouldn't leave my room for days at a time, 3 or 4 days. I would just be in my room and wouldn't be able to leave because I'd be having kind of really, really bad anxiety attacks. And I went through every single PCOS symptom. It took years before I got that formal diagnosis, but my diet had changed quite a lot, even from being that whole food plant-based diet when I was growing up and living at home, and obviously having the privilege of having my parents cooking. When I went off to university, I had that typical student diet. So even though I was eating vegan, it was a lot of chips, a lot of alcohol, a lot of biscuits. So it was a technically vegan diet for the most part, but I was really not getting those whole colourful foods in. And I think that's a point I want to make. I don't think it's on everyone who's vegan to try and be as healthy as possible, but I think I realized for myself that looking after myself means that I'm not pouring from an empty cup, and I can be a better advocate for non-human animals, for human beings, for my clients. I can actually help more people when I'm able to look after myself. And as someone who has got multiple chronic conditions myself, I don't even know where I'd be without this. I think the single best thing I've done in my life is going vegan, and within that, trying to be more whole food plant-based, without putting a big amount of pressure on myself. I still enjoy vegan pizza and cupcakes and all of those things, but it's not a sort of the star of the show for me. I try and get all of those colorful foods in when I can.
Stu, I think we need a Veganuary t-shirt that says soy boy. What do you think, Stu?
I love that idea. Yeah, I'd wear it. I was going to say that we ask our participants a survey every year at the end of January, and in the last couple of years, I've really noticed people saying one of the reasons they've taken part is to deal with symptoms of PCOS. So it's clear that the message is getting out there, which is absolutely great. I wanted to come and talk maybe a bit more generally about hormonal health again. And ask you what you think the most persistent myths about plant-based diets and hormonal health are.
So I think soya was the big one, which we covered.
Yeah.
But I think also the idea that you can't get enough protein, because obviously protein is really important for hormonal health. As we age, we do need to slightly increase our protein intake, especially as we head into things like perimenopause and menopause, and that can really help with body composition and bone density and everything, but it's only a slight increase. And what's really important to mention is that you can get all the amino acids you need from plant foods. They contain them in abundance. And obviously, I always recommend eating a variety of different foods. It doesn't need to be necessarily at the same meal. Our bodies tend to cycle amino acids every 48 hours or so. But it's important to get, that variety in. So the beans and rice and tofu and different things in. And I strength train. It's really important for PCOS. It can have huge benefits in improving insulin sensitivity, increasing muscle mass, and improving body composition. And it's really good for warding off things like sarcopenia and osteoporosis in the future as well. Even though I'm not necessarily at that age yet, we do lose about a pound of lean muscle mass after the age of 30. And of course, everyone will benefit from doing more strength training as well. It's just having that mix in that's helpful. So if you are strength training, then having a good amount of plant protein in the diet, and that's going to help with that insulin sensitivity and helping in general with how your hormones function. Overdoing anything isn't great. Of course, you see a lot of influencers talking about no longer being vegan. And when I follow these influencers and I see what they're doing, no one can ever tell what someone's health is like from an Instagram page, or even from seeing someone walk down the street. You could have no idea what invisible conditions or disabilities someone might be living with. And it's not your business necessarily. But sometimes when influencers share, I had all these issues on a vegan diet, that's their journey and that's their story. But sometimes I will notice that they have been eating quite a restrictive diet. When they share their what to eat, I eat in a day, they're not adequately fueling. So just eating, fruits and vegetables is not an adequate meal. If you're having a smoothie, just having, some water, frozen blueberries and spinach is not a smoothie. A smoothie needs to contain all the relevant food groups to be a proper meal. So you would want to include things like soya milk, flax seeds, which again are really rich in lignans, which help with things that can improve things like painful periods. So I would add those in. I would add in some herbs and spices like cinnamon, which we know may potentially help with sugar cravings and PCOS, but herbs and spices have the most antioxidants of any food group. I would want to add in some soy milk, because we know about a cup of that has about 6 to 8 grams of protein. Maybe some dark leafy greens, which are the most micronutrient rich of any food group. Frozen blueberries, which again are cheaper than fresh and even more nutritious because they're packed at the point of their prime. And they're rich in anthocyanins, which really help with things like skin health, brain health, all really important. And just round out off that meal, so you've got a good amount of things like healthy fats as well, maybe some almond butter or some walnuts, which are rich in omega-3 fats. I think that sometimes it's that lack of understanding how to properly fuel and how to get those nutrients on a plant-based diet. It's those restrictive tendencies. You can't just remove the meat and dairy and fish and eggs from your plate. You've got to think about what you're adding in. You've got to add in that maybe tofu, tempeh, beans, lentils. There's such a variety of plant foods, but often we're just focusing on cutting things out. And you'll often see that if you go down to the pub and you order a vegan meal, it can be quite lacking. Sometimes it could just be potatoes and veggies and might not have a really kind of good amount of all those nutrients. And you can see the big difference sometimes when you go to a vegan restaurant and it's a lot more balanced.
So we're all about informational integrity here at Veganuary. So can you tell us what evidence-based research you're seeing right now that most strongly supports plant-based nutrition for hormonal health?
So that's so important to me. It's been kind of a long time passion. And that's why 5.5 years ago, I joined Plant-Based Health Professionals UK as their communications lead to get out the message around evidence-based plant-based nutrition. And that means sharing up-to-date studies, sharing the latest information and research. Every single thing that we do is scientifically referenced. I've hosted about 95 hours of CPD accredited webinars with experts from around the world. And every single thing has to pass official CPD checks. So it's incredibly important to me to be scientific. I don't think we need to distort the science to encourage people to go vegan. The science is rock solid around eating a healthy plant-based diet. And it's actually going to support people who are vegan to thrive, to supplement adequately, to make sure that they're getting the right nutrition. And you don't need to become a nutritionist like me and retrain and do all those years of studying. But every single person who wants to be healthy does need to know the nutrition basics, whether they're an omnivore or they're vegan. They need to spend a little bit of time thinking about, okay, this is where my nutrients are coming from, just a little bit conscious and a bit aware. It might mean making that extra effort to make those overnight oats the day before so that you've got a nutritious breakfast in there. But there are so many long-term health studies that look at hormonal health and the impact of diet, whether you're looking at things like the Nurses' Health Study and things like that, these large-scale studies, things like even the Epic Oxford study. There are loads of studies showing the link between, for example, insulin resistance and nutrition, or the role of plant-based foods in hormonal health. And this is in the national and international guidelines. So when you look at NICE guidelines, ASHRAE guidelines on chronic diseases, and major guidelines around cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, dementia prevention, stroke, and certain types of cancer, you will see consistently that a whole food plant-based diet comes out strong. Now, can we say that that diet shouldn't include any animal foods? Of course, as an ethical vegan, I don't include any animal foods in my diet, but that is that person's prerogative. I think we can say at Plant-Based Health Professionals, we recommend an exclusively plant-based diet, but certainly about 85 to 95% of the diet would be whole food plant-based to get the most benefits. And then if you're having that occasional piece of oily fish or, the chocolate cake or whatever, that's an individual decision, that's someone's decision. But in terms of health outcomes, we know that shifting to an exclusively or as close to possible whole food plant-based diet has so many benefits. And we also have to think about the planet. We can't be recommending a diet that cannot, support the world. We're in a climate crisis. So I think we have a duty as health professionals to recommend a diet that is going to have that sustainability aspects and aspect kind of embedded in. We don't have enough oily fish for everyone to be eating that many portions every week. And I do take an EPA DHA algae-derived supplement. I think that there's the data on it that's emerging is becoming kind of slightly clearer around its importance. But I also get enough alpha linoleic acid, so that's another form of omega-3 that sometimes we can convert to EPA and DHA. And I get that through things like ground flax seeds or walnuts and chia seeds. But it's really, really important to me. And I always say, if someone is talking about nutrition on their social media and things, don't be afraid to reach out to them and say, please, could I have the scientific reference for that? And just be aware that not everyone is interpreting kind of studies in the way that is accurate. So they're just taking sometimes the headline and they might not be looking at the data in detail. So there are definitely sources that I follow that I think are really strong. I always go to places, obviously, like Plant-Based Health Professionals UK and the NHS and other places where I think you get more solid evidence.
Brilliant. That was so comprehensive. That was so good. I'd love to know where you like to go to eat dinner. Where's your favourite place to go out to a restaurant?
Oh, I actually love hole-in-the-wall places. I find that they do amazing vegan options. So I lived in Singapore for several years in my 20s. I also lived in India for a few years. So I like kind of those rustic hole-in-the-wall spots in London. So I might go kind of down a random road in Euston to get some Singaporean noodles. And quite often those foods are naturally dairy free and they often have tofu on the menu and things like that. So I'll get them to add it in. So I really enjoy those kinds of places that are just kind of smaller and a little bit more unknown. In terms of, vegan food, we're sport for choice in London. But I do have to say, I love cooking myself and I love hosting dinner parties and having friends over. So I probably say my house, which sounds really, really pompous, but I do love like home cooked food and having people over and sharing the joys of amazing vegan food. And I had a completely vegan wedding in 2019. After my wedding, 6 people went fully vegan the day it ended. My best friend and her entire family went vegan because they were shocked that Indian food could be veganized and taste so delicious. And my husband, who went to college in the US, he lived with a load of American footballers. I think the shortest one was 6'3", who came. They had never eaten a vegan meal in their life, and they had the whole weekend just eating vegan. They had no idea. They thought the jackfruit was pulled pork. Apparently, I had no idea about this. But I was chatting to them, and they were like, "This is incredible. This is just tasty." We just didn't label everything as being vegan. It just was everything about it. From I didn't wear silk in my Indian outfit. We made sure that even down to things like the paper that the wedding invitations were printed on, I made sure was vegan. There's so much effort that went into that because you realize how much animals are exploited pretty much in every single thing that we do. So to be that intentional about it, it did take a lot of effort and time, but I think it showed people that you can have joyful, incredible celebrations that are completely vegan and that you're not sacrificing anything. And so I think it encouraged people without kind of maybe pushing it down their throats or saying you have to do this. I think they left feeling inspired and feeling like this is a change that they could embrace more in their lives. So yeah, I was really happy about that. And I think that that's why I always try and bring along a dish if I'm going to a barbecue or I'm doing things. I don't avoid those events with meat and things. I try and just bring along something vegan and show people how delicious it can be.
Yeah, food really is the best form of advocacy, I think. So what about a super indulgent treat? let's say that you you said you have some flexibility in your diet and you like to have the occasional cupcake or pizza. What is your favorite food vice?
Oh, such a good. I have a massive sweet tooth. Indian desserts are really sweet as well, so maybe it comes from there. But I probably, I think my taste buds have changed a lot. So probably if I had a regular cupcake, I do find it too sweet, and I probably wouldn't eat the whole thing now just because I wouldn't enjoy it as much, not because I wouldn't want to. But I love things like a good old British dessert. So like apple crumble with custard. I would obviously have it totally vegan, and that would be like my comfort food. Is like I really like good old like fashioned British desserts like sticky toffee pudding and things like that. So that's probably what I'd have. My husband's a complete burger addict. Like he used to eat obviously burgers with meat and things before, now goes for all the vegan burgers and things. So that's we always that's kind of our comfort food that we go for. And I think it's important to have fun foods. I think that it's part of a healthy lifestyle, a healthy mindset. It different amounts for different people, or whatever you feel comfortable with, but you don't need to be all or nothing with things that you do. And I think that there's place for those foods in the diet. It's just that when you can, trying to fill those diets with color and fiber and getting all that goodness, it means that's you're probably going to be drawn to that big bowl of watermelon or the delicious. I'm currently addicted to mangoes because it's mango season in India, so I've been buying them from the store and having those instead of maybe going for the more kind of the more ultra processed options. And it just becomes second nature. It's not even something I think about too much anymore.
Great. Like a fruit crumble with custard is right up my alley as well. I love that stuff. Well, thank you very much for coming and speaking to us today. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you. Where can people follow you and find out more about your work?
So definitely check out plantbasedhealthprofessionals.com because we have tons and tons of fact sheets, free webinars, articles, videos on everything, whether it's you want to know about a plant-based diet for celiac disease or for muscle building or for bone health or brain health. We cover everything on there, and it's a fantastic resource for everyone, whether or not they're fully plant-based, and there's loads of freebies on there. I am active on Instagram at Rohini Bajekal, and if you can always pop into my DMs, ask me questions. I really try and respond to every question that I get, or you can email me as well. My website is rohinibajekal.com, and I see clients one-to-one or doing group programs. And it's not just PCOS I cover every aspect relating to plant-based health. If I'm not able to help, I will always refer you on to someone that can help, but it's my passion. And I'm just always around for a chat. You can have a free chat with me via my website as well if you just want to ask a couple of questions. I'm always trying to just spread information and knowledge and joy about the benefits of this way of eating. I think it's touched so many people in a positive way in my inner circle, my family, and I think I wish more people would be able to discover it and see the benefits. Sadly, since I became a nutritionist, nobody asked me at dinner parties why I'm vegan. I think they're scared of how long I probably talk for. I think back in the day, I wish I could go back to university and give everyone like an earful, but nobody asked me anymore, so it's really sad. But yeah, it has had a ripple effect, I think, for friends to be able to see just how incredible the food is. And I think generally most people do want to live in alignment with their values, and having someone in your circle that is vegan probably means that my friends are really supportive. They're like, if you want, I'm the kind of person that chooses the restaurant, so I will always choose a vegan restaurant when I have a chance, and my friends are very sweet about coming and eating there with me. And I just think lead by example, and don't be afraid to book the place and say, let's go there. I think sometimes we're worried about inconveniencing people, but you don't know, you might actually open their mind.
Brilliant. What a great note to end on. Thank you very much, Rohini.
Well, thank you so much. It was so great to speak to you, Wendy and Stuart, and thank you for everything you're doing and all the advocacy for animals, for people, and the planet.
Wendy, are you ready for just a random food question from me?
Throw it at me.
Tell me about a memorable food experience from a time when you were traveling.
Okay, one comes to mind right away, which is I was in Prague, and my family is Czech, but it was the first time I'd ever been there myself. So it was a little bit of this like heritage exploration trip. And I found this little restaurant in Prague, which was very aptly named Vegans Prague. But you go up this like dark stairway with candles lit the whole way up for 3 flights. And then you end up in this beautiful little, like almost attic restaurant. It's just so cozy. I don't know if there was actually a fireplace there, but in my memory, there's a fireplace there. There's like snowing outside. And I ordered a dish called svichkova, which is like blended root vegetable sauce, typically served with ground beef, but they had a veggie version. And it was just like the warmest, coziest moment. And I loved being able to reconnect with my roots, but also still align with my values. So yeah, one of my favorite food memories of all time.
Very nice. The one that springs to mind for me is Imogen and I, my wife and I went to Madrid. No, we didn't. Milan a few years ago, and we looked up a vegan restaurant, and it was a right trek to get to it. We went like a really, and we ended up in sort of a neighborhood where it just seemed like everything was closed. We were sort of like, oh God, are we in the wrong place? But then we found this lovely little restaurant, and we had blinis, vegan blinis, and they were really, really nice. And I was, by the end of the main meal, I was really, really stuffed. But then I saw that they had tiramisu on the menu, and I am an absolute fiend for tiramisu. I really love it. So yeah, and it was really delicious. So yeah, that was really nice. That was a lovely holiday actually. So it's nice to think back to those memories. And also before we had kids, so we used to actually like have fun. So Wendy, how can people contact us?
If you'd like to get in touch with Stu and I, you can email us at podcast@veganuary.com. And of course, if you just want to follow along with what we're up to, you can find Veganuary on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever you're on social media. We're probably there too.
Brill. And how can people take part in Veganuary if they'd like to?
It's super simple. You're just going to go to veganuary.com, and on the top right corner of the page, you'll see a big pink Try Vegan button. Click that. Just give us your name, your country, and your email address, and you'll start getting an email every day with tips and recipes and everything you need to give it a go. And they're delivered from Stu, so you'll get to hear from him in your inbox every day.
Lovely. This podcast was recorded at Distorted Podcast Studios and produced by Jim Moore at Bloody Vegans Productions. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe, and we'd love you to rate us 5 stars. Until next time, see you later.
1, 2,